may have noticed in your bulletin insert over on one side to the right there is something that kind of looks like a word salad. Like some words have all been tossed together, maybe with a little oil and vinegar on to make them kind of stick. But actually there is a design for that. These are the words of the text from the gospel reading that we just read. And this is called a word cloud, or sometimes it's called a wordle. And what this does is it takes the text that you put in, whatever that is, you put the text of the whole novel in there if you want, and it picks out the primary words that are repeated more often. And the more often the word is repeated, the larger it becomes in the word art. So I wanted you to notice the words that are repeated over and over in this John passage. You see that love is the largest one, the one repeated more often than any other. And there's Father and will and friends, and above that, that's not a foreign word, abidiones, that's abide and one, two different words. Originally they were red and black, but I decided to make them all black, and I forgot to put any space between them. But you notice that there is the repetition of the words, and that love and Father and will and one and abide are the key words that are repeated over and over in this text. 15th chapter of John is what is often called part of Jesus' farewell discourse, I believe. It is where Jesus has gathered with the disciples again after all of these years with them, still trying to help them understand what they're called to do and how they are called to live after he is no longer with them in the flesh. And so this is an additional time where he describes to them how they are given to live. And he uses the word abide, the Greek word meno, which means a deep and settled and peaceful presence that does not go away. It reminds me of the Hebrew word chesed from Psalm 107, which is often translated as steadfastness or steadfast love, because abiding in God's love, that agape love, which is the richest and most powerful form of love that chooses the well-being of others as highest priority, is exactly what Jesus is telling the disciples that they are to live and be and become even after he is gone. Jesus explains that our life's purpose is to abide in God the way that he abides in God, which is to abide in love, because love is the essence of who God is. I want to tell you two brief stories of abiding love as I have experienced them in my life. The first story goes back to 1986. That was the year that my mother died, which you have heard a little bit about over these few months, and this is not the rest of that story, so you'll have to hold for that. But after my mother died in 1986, my father remarried a year later in 1987, and so I had a stepmother. And at that time, even though I was not at home with them, I was married, and as a matter of fact, already in seminary, and our first child was not quite a year old. She would turn a year old in June, and they married in March. Deetta became stepmother and grandmother to my children through the years. And she and Dad had 17 years together before he passed away in July of 2004. But Deetta and I still keep in touch. She calls every once in a while, and I call her, and more often than not, it is by email that we keep in touch. And she sends me an email about every 2 or 3 weeks, maybe, just randomly, because she reads all of the things that I publish online in the blog, and every once in a while there will be something that will resonate with her, and she will send me a note and tell me what it meant to her and how she appreciates it. And about 2 or 3 months ago, I don't remember exactly when it was, but it was here in Greeneville when I received an email from her one day. And she was talking about something that I had written. I have no idea what it was, because that wasn't the point. She said in her email, and I have saved that, she said, "God has blessed you with a gift. Your dad recognized it in you. He admired you, but wasn't able to express it openly. No one had ever done so for him." That was eye-opening for me. I knew my dad loved me. I knew he had trouble expressing that. Most of the time when he said he was proud of me, it was when I had done something successful on the field or the court. And occasionally when I lived up to his high standards for academics. But I realized when I got that I needed to send a message to my 3 children. Because I wanted them to know how proud I was of them. And so I sent them Dietta's message. And I said, "I'm sharing this not because I want you to know that she likes something I wrote, but because I have been afraid that there are times when I haven't told you how proud I am of you." That is a story of abiding love that, if you will, has come from beyond the grave, so to speak, because I did not know about that until she told me. Something my dad must have confided in her during the 17 years that they were together. And the second story is about a person that I will call my second son. I have 3 biological children, 2 daughters and a son. There's another young man who is now my son, and his name is Patrick. I met Patrick through a friend of mine who was a Presbyterian pastor in Marionville, Pennsylvania, named Boyd. And Boyd works with his presbytery in Pennsylvania to raise money to provide education for orphans in the African country of Rwanda. But Boyd introduced me to Patrick, not in Rwanda, because Patrick lives in Malawi, neighboring Rwanda. And Patrick is also Boyd's son, so to speak, because Patrick has had a dream to become a nurse and a midwife and to open an orphanage in Malawi to take care of the many thousands of children who have no parents. Patrick knows very well what this is like because he and his siblings are orphans. He is the oldest. He was 24 a little over a year and a half ago when I met him. This past December he turned 25. And he's got about 3 more months left of school for his certificate in nursing. And he had 4 younger siblings, a brother slightly younger than he was, whose name was Innocent. And Innocent died before I ever got to know Patrick, so I've only seen 1 picture of him. He has a sister younger than Innocent whose name is Thandi, and she has just now started her university program to become a care specialist for children with special needs. That has been her lifelong goal, and she finally found someone who could help her go to university. And the 2 youngest are Madziko, who is a 16-year-old young man, and Dorothy, who is a 12-year-old girl. All of those are Patrick's siblings, and so now there are 4 of them, Patrick and Thandi and Madziko and Dorothy. And over the course of my connection with Patrick, I have agreed to help provide them with food for their family and to help pay for some of their educational expenses. School is free, but you're only allowed to come if you have a uniform, shoes, books, and the supplies needed to write and do your work. And so his younger siblings did not have those supplies and could not go to school, so they were behind, but they are now in school and doing well. The reason I tell you about Patrick's story is because there is a lot of death in Malawi from diseases and illnesses that we know as very treatable and preventable here in the United States, but they do not have those resources in Malawi. People die from malaria, typhoid, hepatitis, and many, many people die from HIV and AIDS. Patrick's brother, Innocent, passed away a little over a year ago because he contracted malaria and there was no money to buy the medicine that would treat it. Boyd, at the time, was paying for his tuition, Patrick's tuition, and Patrick was afraid to ask him for additional money for the medicine for malaria, and it cost his brother's life. Boyd said that was one of the biggest heartbreaks of his entire life, to find out that he could have prevented Innocent from dying, but didn't know. Now, I tell you Patrick's story because this is a young man not only with a big dream, but with a big heart. He has had conversations with me over the year and a half as we communicate electronically about his desire to open an orphanage that he calls Orphans' Hope, and to provide food and shelter and education for orphans in his own native Malawi. But that's just part of what he does. Over the last year and a half, I have seen photographs and heard stories of him traveling to different places for what they call practicals, which would be an institutional setting where they practice their nursing, and back in his home village, where he has found young children who are orphaned without the necessary things to send them to school, and he has taken his own money to buy them food and clothes and shoes and books and resources so that they can go to school. Numerous times he has done this. But the story that makes me think about this idea of God's abiding love is a story that began last June when he sent me a picture of him with two older gentlemen, and they were standing in a big ravine that looked like just a water runoff place. And he called them the grandparents, these two men. He said, "Here are the grandparents from my village, and this is where they live." There was a hole dug out in the ravine, and they had a big tattered piece of black tarp that they used to pull over them when it rained. He said, "These men need a place to live." I said, "Well, Patrick, is there a house that they can live in?" He said, "No, there's no place for them to live. I want to build them a house." I said, "Patrick, you can't build a house. How do you build a house? How much money will that take?" He said, "I will get the resources and I will build a house." Well, he's been saying that for almost a year now. And 2 weeks ago, he sent me photographs of bricks and metal roofing being delivered to the town where he lives. And he and some of his classmates and friends are in the process of building a small one-room house for these two people that I originally thought were his grandparents. But so I asked him, I said, "Are these your grandparents?" And he said, "No, these are just grandfathers from our community. And they need a place to live because when it rains, they are covered in mud and have no way to get out of it." This is abiding love at work and alive and well in our world. This is the love that we are called to practice each and every day of our lives. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.